The town of Briar Hollow had a tradition, one that stretched back generations, its origins whispered in half-remembered stories and guarded by the oldest families. Every autumn, as the leaves turned crimson and the air carried the scent of burning wood, the townspeople would gather at the edge of the fields to place the scarecrow. It was no ordinary scarecrow. Stuffed with dried cornstalks and wrapped in weathered burlap, its hollow eyes seemed to follow those who dared glance at it for too long. Atop its head sat a tattered hat, and around its neck hung a rope, frayed and old, as if it had once served another purpose. Yet, year after year, they placed it in the same spot and the crops flourished. But this year was different. The harvest was failing. The corn stalks were brittle, the pumpkins rotted on the vine, and the apples fell before they could ripen. The town's survival depended on the land, and fear spread like wildfire. Something was wrong. The omen, Old Man Garrick, the town's elder and keeper of traditions, was the first to speak of it. "The bargain has been broken," he muttered, voice hoarse with age. "The scarecrow is displeased." Many dismissed his words as the ramblings of a superstitious old man. But when the livestock began dying, cows found shriveled in their pens, chickens frozen as if struck dead in terror, the town grew desperate. The scarecrow stood silent in the fields, its form unmoving. And then, one night, young Tommy Fields vanished. His mother found the back door swinging open, the cold autumn wind rustling the curtains. His footprints led straight to the field, stopping at the base of the scarecrow. But Tommy was nowhere to be found. Panic took hold. The town gathered, torches and lanterns in hand, demanding answers. Garrick, standing before them with sunken eyes, finally revealed the truth. The forgotten pact. Long ago, when Briar Hollow was on the brink of ruin, a desperate farmer made a pact. The land was cursed, crops failed, starvation loomed, and so he prayed for salvation. A stranger arrived, cloaked in shadow, and offered a deal. Each autumn, the town must place the scarecrow and make a small sacrifice, a drop of blood, a token of life, to ensure prosperity. In return, the fields would yield plenty. For generations, the tradition had been kept. A small cut, a few drops on the scarecrow's straw-stuffed hand, and the harvest would thrive. But this year, someone had failed to uphold their end of the bargain. The scarecrow was hungry, and now it wanted more. The final night, fear gripped the town. If a mere drop of blood had sustained the harvest for centuries, what would it take to appease the scarecrow now? The answer came at midnight. A scream rang out from the fields. The townspeople rushed forward, lanterns flickering, only to find the scarecrow gone. In its place stood something tall and terrible, its burlap face twisted into a crude mockery of a grin, its arms outstretched, fingers sharp like the thorns of a dying vine. In its grasp was Tommy Fields, his face pale, his eyes wide in silent terror. Garrick fell to his knees. "It wants a life." The town was given a choice. Sacrifice one or let the whole town wither. It was an impossible decision. But as the wind howled and the scarecrow's shadow loomed over them, one by one, the townspeople stepped back, leaving only Tommy's mother, clutching her son's hand. Tommy screamed as the scarecrow pulled him into the darkness of the fields. His cries faded into the wind, swallowed by the rustling stalks. And then silence. The next morning, the crops stood tall, golden and plentiful. The scarecrow was back in its place, staring vacantly across the fields, its form untouched, except for the small, withered hand now hanging from its burlap sleeve. The harvest was saved, but the town of Briar Hollow would never forget the price they had paid. And as autumn faded to winter, one thought lingered in their minds. Next year, the scarecrow would hunger again. Autumn came early that year. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of burning wood and damp earth. Amber, a quiet 14-year-old girl, had always loved the fall. The way the world seemed to slow, how the trees shed their leaves like whispered goodbyes. But this year, something was different. It started on a Sunday afternoon. She was raking leaves in the backyard when she heard it. A faint whisper carried on the wind. She froze, gripping the wooden handle of the rake, her heart thudding in her chest. "Amber!" The voice was soft, almost playful. She spun around, expecting to see her younger brother playing a trick. But the yard was empty, save for the towering oak trees shedding their brittle leaves. She shook her head and continued raking, convincing herself it was just the wind. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard it again. The same whisper, curling through the air like dry leaves rustling in the wind. This time it was closer. Amber! She sat up, her pulse racing. Was someone outside? She crept to the window, peering into the backyard. The leaf piles she had raked earlier were undisturbed, motionless in the dim glow of the porch light. She forced herself to look away, swallowing her unease. It had to be her imagination. But the next day, the whispers changed. The secrets begin. Amber tried to ignore it, but every time she stepped outside, the voices returned. At first, they only called her name. Then they started saying things no one else should know. You still have the note from Daniel. Her breath caught in her throat. Daniel was a boy at school she had liked last year. She had saved a crumpled note from him, hidden deep in her drawer. No one knew about it. You lied about the broken vase. Amber shivered. When she was 8, she had knocked over her mother's favorite vase and blamed it on the cat. It was a secret she had carried for years. Your father is not coming home. Amber's blood ran cold. Her father had left 2 years ago, promising to return. Her mother still clung to hope. But something in the whisper's tone sent a chill through her. She ran inside, slamming the door behind her, digging for the truth. Days passed, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The leaves shifted unnaturally in the yard, swirling without wind, clustering in strange patterns. The voices spoke in layers, overlapping, some pleading, some laughing, some sobbing. Amber couldn't ignore them anymore. She started digging through the old family records her mother kept in the attic, searching for something, anything, that could explain what was happening. Then she found it, a yellowed newspaper clipping from decades ago. The headline made her stomach drop. Local children missing, last seen playing in the woods. The article was dated 50 years ago. It told the story of 4 children who vanished in the very woods behind Amber's house. Their bodies were never found. But at the bottom of the article, a detail caught her eye. A witness reported hearing whispers in the leaves before the children disappeared. Amber's hands trembled. The whispers weren't just voices. They were the echoes of the lost. The final warning. That night, the voices grew frantic. The leaves outside her window twisted into the shape of outstretched hands, clawing at the glass. The wind howled, but through it, she could make out their desperate words. They are coming. Run. Before it's too late. A shadow moved in the trees. Not human, something else. Tall, with elongated limbs that swayed unnaturally. Its face was obscured by the shifting leaves, but she could feel it watching her. Amber backed away from the window, her breath shallow. The whispers rose to a deafening chorus, screaming now. She didn't wait. She grabbed her mother's keys and bolted for the front door, dragging her mother with her. They drove until the house was nothing but a distant memory in the rearview mirror. The next morning, the news reported a fire had burned through the woods behind their house. No known cause, but Amber knew the truth. The leaves had been warning her, and whatever had been waiting in the trees had lost its chance. For now. Every autumn, on the night of the first frost, the teenagers of Hollow Creek gathered in the clearing by Blackwood Lake. It was tradition. Light the bonfire, tell ghost stories, and prove they weren't scared of the dark. This year was no different. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp leaves and burning wood. The fire crackled high, its orange glow casting flickering shadows on the circle of friends. Liam, Ava, Jonah, Riley, and Cassie. They had been doing this for years, but something about this night felt off. Ava was the first to notice. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The others fell silent. At first, all they heard was the rustling of leaves in the cold breeze. Then, faintly, a whisper, low and indistinct, like voices carried on the wind. Jonah scoffed. Just the wind. Come on, who's got a story? Liam grinned, pulling out his phone. I found something online. A ritual. Riley rolled her eyes. Oh great. Another dumb internet scare. No, listen, Liam insisted. It's called the Bonfire Pact. You tell a story, then throw something personal into the flames. If the fire accepts it, it'll show you the spirit of the story. Cassie shivered. Sounds like a bad idea. Jonah smirked. So we're doing it? One by one, they told their stories. Tales of haunted roads, ghostly apparitions, and cursed objects. With each story, they tossed something personal into the fire. A ring, a keychain, a torn note. The fire flared each time, licking higher as if feeding on the offerings. Then it was Liam's turn. I saved the best for last, he said, pulling out a small, yellowed piece of paper. I found this in my attic. My grandpa wrote it when he was our age. He unfolded the fragile page and read aloud. If you light the fire and feed it well, if you speak the names and ring the bell, the flames will burn, the spirits wake, and one of you the fire will take. Ava's stomach twisted. Liam, what the hell? It's just an old rhyme, he said, laughing nervously. My grandpa was messing around, just like us. Then don't read the rest, Cassie urged. It's creepy, but Liam had already finished. He tossed the paper into the fire. The flames roared, turning an unnatural blue. The wind died, leaving only eerie silence. Then the fire whispered back. The fire takes its due. The voices rose from the flames, echoing, distorted. They spoke their names. Liam, Ava, Jonah, Riley, Cassie. Cassie gasped. No way. Then the shadows around them moved. Shapes twisted, forming figures, humanoid but wrong. Their bodies shifting like smoke, eyes burning like embers. One of the figures stepped forward, its voice crackling like dry wood. One must stay. Jonah laughed, but it was forced. Nice trick, Liam. How'd you? The shadow lunged. Jonah screamed as the fire flared, wrapping around his ankle like a living thing. The smell of burning fabric filled the air as he scrambled back, eyes wide with terror. Liam grabbed a stick and swung it at the flames. The fire recoiled, but the shadows only grew darker. Run, he shouted. They bolted toward the woods, their footsteps pounding against the cold earth. Behind them, the bonfire roared, the figures moving like dancers in the flames. But the fire couldn't reach them outside the circle. They didn't stop running until they reached the road. Gasping for breath, Riley turned back. Is Jonah? Jonah was still there, trapped in the fire's glow, his face twisted in fear. The figures circled him. Then, in a flash of blue flame, he was gone. The pact remains. The bonfire burned itself out by morning. There was no sign of Jonah. The authorities searched for weeks, but no trace of him was ever found. The remaining four knew the truth, but who would believe them? A year passed, then two. They tried to forget, until the first frost of the next autumn. One by one, they received messages, notes left in lockers, carved into tree trunks, written in the ash of old fire pits. The pact was made. The fire took one, but it still hungers. This year it will take another. And on the night of the first frost, the bonfire would burn again.